And can I get one of the speakers to confirm that you could see my screen with the Carbon Leadership Forum?
I cannot see your screen, Zena.
Okay, let's do that again then. How about now, Kelly?
Okay, it says that it has started sharing, but I'm just seeing a black screen. Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Perfect. Wonderful. I'm glad we got that worked out. So yeah, I'll ask everybody to mute again. Thanks for your help. To introduce myself, my name is Zaina Elali. I am the co-chair of the Carbon Leadership Forum Toronto chapter. And I would like, and I'm also part of Canadian Urban Limited. I want to begin by speaking about our initiative at Carbon Leadership Forum. We are here to inspire and spur collective action to solve the embodied carbon challenge. As a Toronto-based group, we acknowledge that the land we are meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So if you have questions, we encourage you to leave it in the chat, and we will cover questions at the very end. We also recommend that you switch over to speaker view, and to also, of course, ensure that unless you're a speaker, that your audio and your video is off. And please note that the session is being recorded. It will get posted on our social media, as well as be shared with you, as well as be posted on our Carbon Leadership Forum Toronto website. You can also see our past events, recordings of our past events. So we definitely encourage you to go ahead and visit our website. Before I introduce our speakers, I wanted to just make note of our next upcoming event taking place on May 24th, the Low Carbon Now initiative. It is a case study in achieving net zero carbon residential buildings in Toronto, and we will be joined by a slew of really experienced and fantastic speakers who will introduce that event for us, introduce that initiative for us. So now to introduce our session for April, HOK Interiors Sustainable Materials Initiative. Our speakers are Kelly Jordan. She has over 20 years of commercial interior design experience with both public and private clientele, including the design and renovation for corporate offices, retail banks, assembly and food service spaces, as well as sensitive heritage restoration. Currently, she is firm-wide leader for sustainable interior design with a focus on materials and their effect on climate change, human and environmental health. Sarah Garisto is a designer dedicated to creating spaces that bring forth exciting and new environments. She has a creative and respectful work ethic, forming designs that are both grounded and engaged through research and iterative design process. Sarah has 3 years of experience working in the industry with a background in workspace, residential, and cultural design. Her work focuses on creating inclusive and accessible spaces that succeed in both form and function. And our third speaker, Taylor Welsh, has been working in the design industry for nearly a decade and has gained a broad range of experience in corporate, hospitality, retail, and healthcare projects. She excels at finding creative solutions to unique design challenges and synthesizing complex information, and is focused on creating spaces that are human-centered and driven by sustainability. So I transferred over to Kelly if you want to take over the screen, and I will keep an eye out on questions, and we will cover the questions at the very end. Feel free to send it directly to me or to post it openly in the chat, and happy to cover it. Very exciting.
Thank you, Zaina. Okay, Zaina, could you just confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, that's super. All right, ready to go. Thanks again, Zaina, and welcome everybody. We are very excited to be here today to talk about a subject that we all find very important to us all, and we're very passionate about. And also we feel very fortunate to be involved in, and that being sustainability related to interior design. From a sustainability perspective at HOK, our focus is on human health, climate change, and social equity. And as many of you know, construction and renovation and building operation currently generate nearly 40% of the worldwide carbon emissions. So today we will share with you some of the strategies that we employ to reduce carbon emissions firm-wide, specifically on our interiors projects. So sustainability has always been a part of our spirit at HOK, and we have a large team of sustainable leaders guiding the improvements in the field of architecture. In 2021, our interiors folks understood the effect that our interior design and renovations have on the climate crisis, and that it's very significant. And we wanted to do something about it. So we began the Interiors Sustainability Design Initiative. Our initiative is led by our liaisons across the firm. These are interior designers with a passion for sustainability. They have volunteered to take on the initiative and are leaders within their design studios. And their goal is to understand how to track materials and their embodied carbon and understand the effect that the renovations have on global carbon emissions. So they are the champions for each of their design studios, and our resources for the designers within their studios. We also meet as a group to sort of collect knowledge, challenges, and put our heads together to evolve the initiative and of course make improvements year after year. So our firm and our liaisons believe that knowledge of materials plays a huge part in human health, equity, and climate change. And that with this knowledge, we increase our relevance in the industry, as well as our confidence and our leadership, while we create positive change in the material market by reducing carbon emissions and making changes to toxicity and chemicals within the products that we specify. In addition, this knowledge helps us to avoid greenwashed marketing, which is unfortunately still in existence. And it also gives us the confidence to ask the right questions and understand the answers that are being given to us through meetings and whatnot with manufacturers.
All right, so this initiative that we're presenting today is something that we've been introducing into our studios for the past 2 years or so. And it really aims to achieve sustainable consideration in all phases of the project through consistent practice between all of our designers. So the challenges that you're seeing on the screen are ones that come with this initiative and start to intertwine themselves into the various phases of our projects. So the first being embed, focusing on embedding sustainable finish selection and tracking into our design process. The second being, communication. So talking, sharing, asking questions, having those conversations with our colleagues and our reps to just gain more insight on what's out there and what's, what's being produced from a sustainability perspective. And then the third one, which is really critical, is reviewing materials early on in our design process. So showing something to the client that we think performs really well, similar to how we approach, sharing finishes that aren't, within our client's budget. We wouldn't show them something that we think is terrible for the environment. And the last one is being inclusive. So just thinking about, incorporating this initiative in all projects, regardless of, if it's going for LEED or WELL or fit well. Just, yeah, thinking about it for every single project.
Currently, we evaluate materials through actually 4 lenses. The first one being embodied carbon. So this is the energy or the carbon which has gone into the extraction, the manufacturing and transportation of a material. So we gather this information from environmental product declarations or EPDs. And these EPDs are third-party verified documents. And within the EPD, there is a section which is related to the life cycle assessment of that material. And this covers the whole life of the product. So from we'll say the extraction to the end of its life and whether it is recycled or not. But currently at HOK, we are only looking at the first 3 stages, which is extraction, manufacturing, and transportation. In other words, the A1 through A3 categories of the life cycle assessment. In the near future, the goal is to look at the remainder of the life cycle assessment, but as it is right now, we're looking at those first 3 stages. The other lens that we look at materials through is green chemistry. So this lens looks at the materials from a hazardous substance perspective and VOC perspective. The next one is sustainable sourcing. So this one relates more to the recycled content or the reduced environmental damage, such as FSC-certified woods. And our newest lens there on the right side of the screen is circularity. So circularity, in essence, is the reuse of materials or items that are already in existence. So this has some of the greatest potential to help us avoid adding new carbon emissions or new energy, which we will talk about a little bit later in the slides.
Okay, so on the screen, you can see a simplified timeline of our sustainable activities on all projects. And within this timeline, you can start to see that sustainability really is a thread that runs through each phase from beginning all the way to the end. So in the pre-design phase, we can understand what the sustainability intentions are for the project and get to discuss how the project should be set up to ensure that those intentions are met. And this starts to tie into those previously mentioned challenges, which in this case is the notion of mindfulness. So being mindful that all projects can incorporate this initiative. In the SD phase, schematic design phase, which is one of the most important phases for this initiative, we can start to focus on what can be reused and try to reduce any unnecessary demolition, which starts to really inform our design decisions as we move into the design development stage. And in the design development stage, we can again start to bring some of those other challenges. So having those conversations to gain more insight on what works well, and being careful to showing something to the client that goes against our initiative. And then in the construction document phase, we start to record our specs based on all of the previous research conducted, which is then realized in the tender and construction phase. With that said, it's really critical and important that during the tender construction phase, the finishes and the specs that we worked so hard to source and select are kept in the project or swapped with something comparable, again, from a sustainability perspective. And lastly, we begin to report the specs and just understand how those finishes are doing and how they're tracking, which we'll get into in more detail later on in this deck.
Thanks, Sarah. So at HOK, we continue to develop new and improved tools as we go through this initiative. based on feedback that that we received from the LIAISONS group, which is our firm-wide interior designers. So this it helps us to streamline the process of selecting materials. So what you're seeing on the screen here is a checklist that we recently developed. It basically summarizes the criteria, which is in our tracking sheet, which we will look at in, I think, the next slide. And here it's moving along without me. I'll just come back a bit. So essentially, this is a single slide, which sort of captures all of our criteria. So the idea for this tool is that a designer could use this while they are looking for materials. They could also take it and send it to a manufacturer and say, okay, you know, either tell me what products you have that meet these criteria, or I have one in mind from you know, your company. Can you tell me more about it? Because sometimes you can't find all of the information you're looking for on their websites very easily. So you can take this and give that to them. They can fill it out. And then what the designer could do is maybe compare two products that seem to be similar and sort of look at this sheet and determine which one is the best from a sustainability perspective. And one of the things that we did here, and you can see under the green chemistry category, is we have organized the list of criteria from the most stringent at the top to the least stringent. So when comparing materials, the designers, all of our designers don't necessarily have to be very familiar with each one of these criteria, but very quickly they can look to see which one has more check marks on the top of the list and sort of choose based on that. Also for the embodied carbon section, which is on the right-hand side there in the lighter green, this is where we have the opportunity to look at and compare the global warming potential of potentially 2 or 3 different materials, or two or three different materials of the same type, and determine which one of these has the lower global warming potential, and then choose based on that. And another feature that I really enjoy about this slide is that at the bottom there on the right, we have a reminder about HOK's position on vinyl products, and that we are avoiding vinyl for many reasons, which we'll get into later. But this is a really handy tool that we're using to help inform our material selection.
So after making those material selections, we track our selections and the sustainable criteria in this finished template that we've developed as a firm. This allows us to keep track of how we're doing on our internal sustainability goals. We'll zoom into each of the criteria in the next slide. So here you're seeing the first column, or number 1 here is the first column of the sustainable tracking. Here under the embodied carbon lens, as Kelly mentioned, we're tracking the life cycle assessment for the product phase of, or the product stage of each selection. So we're gathering the global warming potential number from the environmental product declaration, and we're teaching our studios generally that lower is better. The less carbon emission, or the lower the GWP is, the less carbon emissions the product has, and the better it is for the world. The next lens that we're looking at is the green chemistry lens. So here we're tracking whether or not a material has met any of the third-party certifications that we've determined to be ideal on the previous slide, such as the Living Product Challenge or Cradle to Cradle certification. We're also tracking the VOC emission criteria. The next portion here is the sustainable sourcing. So here we're looking at recycled content, both pre and post-consumer, FSC certified woods, and ensuring that we are following through with specifying 100% FSC certified woods as possible. And this year, we've also added a new column related to bio-based materials and reused materials. We've also created an internal concept board, which is a library for our studios to share info and favorite specifications as we come across them. So this is going to continue to evolve as we get better and better, and is intended to be a resource for easy, quick specifications in each of our studios.
Yeah, and then just to add to that, Taylor, the reason why we developed this concept board was to make it a little easier for our studios and more efficient, so that not each designer has to go out and find their own materials. We can leverage what each other has found. But we also had a lot of comments over the years about the wish to have a database of materials, but from our perspective, it was just too much of a daunting task, especially since materials change all the time. So this is, you know, a place to go where you can find an image and a link to a product, and then the designer can kind of take it from there and dive a little bit deeper into the materials. So not so much of a database, but a sort of a pseudo database. Okay. And as I had mentioned earlier, at HOK, our position on vinyl is to avoid it, to just say no. And we have a list of reasons here on the left. Of course, there are probably 100 reasons to avoid vinyl, but here we have some of the most important ones. So vinyl or LVT or PVC, which are all the same thing, they are known carcinogens. So in essence, it causes cancer. It's also a very persistent organic pollutant in that once it is created or released into the environment, that being outdoors or indoors, the pollutant never goes away. And I think for this audience here today, probably the most important thing is that the production of vinyl releases extremely high levels of carbon dioxide, which in essence is what's driving up climate change, or the sort of heating up of the earth. So for these reasons, as I said, HOK and our position is to avoid vinyl. And vinyl has become a very popular material, especially for interior design. And I would say very popular for resilient flooring, mostly because it's inexpensive and it does wear well. And you can also get some very convincingly appearing wood look floors. But unfortunately, we just can't do it anymore. We need to specify more sustainable products. So there are a list of some here, which are on the right-hand side of the screen. So one that we have been leaning towards is linoleum or rubber. Also, bio-based flooring is somewhat new. Apparently, there are going to be some, I think, more durable bio-based floors launched this summer at Neocon. So we're really excited about the launch of those. And also carpet is another key material, which sort of, I would almost say, hides a bit of that vinyl material, and that the backing of the carpet is often made out of PVC or vinyl. So it's really important to look at what the backing is. And I know that Shaw has EcoWorks, which is a really great backing to their material, their carpet. And Interface has Sequest BioX, again, another one that doesn't have vinyl in the backing. Another favorite material is vinyl wall covering, of course, because it's, again, inexpensive and durable. But there are some other materials that are out on the market. Of course, we could use paint instead of vinyl wall covering. But there is a thermoplastic olefin, which is available, and a polyethylene material from Zorel. So lots of opportunities, and because this message is out in the marketplace, manufacturers are understanding that we're looking for alternatives, and they're happy to develop those materials. So it's one thing we're really excited about.
So as mentioned earlier, dialogue and sharing of concerns, ideas, and intentions are one of the most important ways in which we can affect change in the industry. So something that HOK has been doing to practice this idea is sharing our sustainability presentations with leading manufacturers, which is what you're seeing here listed on the screen. And we continue to grow our list year by year. So we present to them a variety we present a variety to a variety of groups such as marketing, sales, and even their website designers, in hopes that they will adjust their product, but also their website, so that the information that we're looking for is more accessible and more easy to find. We think that supply does sort of follow demand, and if we communicate this, hopefully we can see more development with sustainable products out there.
Thanks, Sarah. So our interiors initiative began 2 years ago in 2021. And we have been tracking our progress against our own set of goals. And we wanted to share these with you today. So although the initiative is still in its early years, we're still seeing some good progress. Actually, in our first year, where we were only able to track 14 projects across the firm, whereas in 2022, we were able to track 67 projects across the firm. And not all projects are viable, and that's due to the project schedule or the scope, because we have obviously we track year after year, and we have deadlines. So we need those projects to have selected materials by our deadlines. So that's why we're not able to track every project for the year. As well, some projects are not in that phase of selecting finishes, or the project may be more planning based. So in that case, we wouldn't be looking at those. So that's why the numbers may appear to be a little bit lower, but we're really just looking at those projects that are viable to be tracked. And so this year for 2023, we're putting some effort into increasing the numbers so that we can really get a better understanding of just how many, or get a better understanding of how well we are selecting materials. And of course, year after year, we're hoping to do better. Okay. And so this slide is showing essentially how we did in relation to the categories that we looked at earlier, which are sort of subcategories to those lenses that we were talking about. So during the first year, we actually did quite well, and you can see that in the green text. So we have our target numbers, our target percentages, and then we have what we actually achieved. So we had some green numbers there, which were really great. And then in the column to the right, we have our 2022 targets. So because we did well in 2021, we decided to increase our targets for the following year. And we did that for each of the categories. And full transparency, we didn't meet our targets, unfortunately. However, we did increase, for example, our collection of the GWP from those EPDs. We did collect more of those on average for 2022 than in 2021. So it's positive. It's a positive trend, at least. And in some cases, like for recycled content and FSC certified wood, unfortunately, we didn't increase. We actually went down in 2022. So based on those results, for 2023, our firm-wide goals remain as they were in 2022, with the hopes that we can reach these goals with the introduction of some of the new tools that we've shared today, and some revised internal processes. So our goals are essentially 65% of our products would include embodied carbon data. So we're not tracking the actual GWP or the global warming potential for every product, but we're tracking whether there is documentation that tells us what the GWP is. So then in years to come, or maybe even next year, we can actually start tracking the amount of global warming potential. But EPDs are relatively new and sometimes difficult to get a hold of. So this is our starting point. And then another goal is 50% of the materials to meet third-party material certification. 90% would be low-emitting certifications. 65% of the products would contain recycled content of whichever type. And 100% of the wood products would be FSC certified wood. And then what we did change for this year was that we added the 10% bio-based or reused materials. And we'll get into some of the reuse a little bit later in the slides. Actually, I think that's coming up right now with Taylor. So Taylor can take us through that.
Circularity is that new lens that we have added. So this is an important lens to look through in order to reduce carbon emissions. It's probably the most effective strategy, but the most challenging at the moment, given the structure of our current economy and resources that we have available. By resources, we mean organizations that are in existence that work in this fashion. However, with greater attention and employment of this strategy by interior designers and the population as a whole, we see great potential with this strategy. So the current economy that we operate in is referred to as linear, where we take, then we make, and then we waste. The next image you see here is the recycling economy, which had promise. However, there's still a lot of waste in that economy, and recycling materials requires the use of energy. So the process continues to add to the climate crisis. The circular economy uses many strategies, including essentially keeping materials in products in use longer and out of the landfill. And that helps to avoid the need to spend new energy making new items.
Yeah, and then just to add to that, that's where we feel that interior design has a really great opportunity to make the circular economy work for us. The circular economy does work, of course, with architecture in that you can reuse a building for potentially 60 or 100 years. So you can, you sort of take that embodied carbon that is a part of that building and then stretch it over 60 or 100 years or however long the building remains. But for interiors, there is a very short life cycle for a space, mostly because of our leases for commercial space are so short. As to our styles, something remains in style for such a short period of time. So 5 or 10 years later, there's this need to, gut interiors, throw it all away and start new. As I said, because of leases changing and organizations moving into different spaces, and also because styles change and we suddenly are afraid or really frankly grossed out by something that looks like it's been installed for a decade for some reason. So the circular economy helps us sort of stretch out and continue to use those materials and be more effective with the carbon that was already used and a part of those components that are in our interiors.
And so with what Kelly said, interior design as an industry has a huge potential to impact carbon emissions. For example, Metropolis Magazine's Climate Toolkit suggests that by 2050, our industry will have influence over almost 1/10 of the world's carbon emissions. So that's a huge opportunity that we have to make a big impact. Our processes and mindset around how we design really needs to change. So we need to consider using less stuff and materials and prioritize the reuse and repurposing of existing materials. We need to find those organizations who specialize in outsourced items. So for example, in our region, Envirotech is a furniture remanufacturer, and they help clients keep their project costs within budget by providing remanufactured furniture, reused furniture, and combining it with new where and when that's required. We also want to prioritize the use of materials that have post-consumer recycled content included. And we see this really having opportunity to affect embodied carbon, recycled content, and green chemistry because we are producing less. So in the new phase that of circularity, some things to consider are first identifying assets to keep. So that includes finishes, lighting, furniture, millwork, demountable partitions, modular meeting rooms, and asking the question, are we able to keep this for the current project? Are we able to reuse for other projects in this client's portfolio? Are there placemaking materials that can be reused in the current location or relocated? So materials such as stone, wood, solid surfaces, quartz countertops. Can lighting stay in place, or could we re-lamp? Can lighting from a nearby space be demolished and relocated to this area that we're completing work in? And then once we move into the schematic design and design development phases, we want to ensure that we're designing for reuse and for disassembly. So we're specifying long-lasting, durable materials that are monolithic and can be reused. Specifying items like demountable partitions that can be reused, and designing for things to be taken apart and reused or recycled. So rather than bolting down our connections, rather than welding our connections, or can we find things that bolt down? Ultimately, to empower the circularity movement and to reduce our future carbon emissions, we need to see products as sustainable, beautiful, durable, and reusable.
Thank you, Taylor. So to conclude, we hope that our experience and the tools that we shared today are helpful to you in your material selections and decisions, and that they help you to ask important questions. And also, please remember that as interior designers, you have the ability to change the future, and that our voices can change the market, and they are, and that we can make a significant impact on the well-being of our planet and all of those who depend on it. So just to remember, interior design does impact climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly, Taylor, and Sarah. That was absolutely informative. And we've got actually some very good questions in the chat that I'll start with. Our first question is, can you please elaborate on your recommendation against PVC and vinyl products, and can you share some alternatives?
Oh, sorry, I only heard part of that, Zena.
Yeah, no problem. Can you please elaborate on your recommendation against PVC and vinyl products, and can you share some alternatives?
Yeah, so the reason why we are avoiding PVC is, as I said before, PVC or vinyl, as well as LVT, which is luxury vinyl tile, which is the vinyl that looks like wood that a lot of us have been using. As I said, there's a lot of chemicals that go into the material as well that are generated by the production of that material that cause cancer. There's also evidence that shows that it causes endocrine disruption, which is essentially disrupts the hormones within human beings. I'm sure within many other animals and creatures around the world as well, but specifically for humans, it is disrupting hormones. It also is playing a part in neurological disorders that we see in humans as well. So from a toxicity perspective, it's definitely, those are great reasons to avoid it. From an embodied carbon perspective, it takes a lot of energy to create vinyl. Yeah, so those are the reasons essentially we are avoiding it. So alternative products, I'm just wondering if I can pull up my slide. But one of the products that we are looking at as an alternative to vinyl flooring is, of course, the polished concrete, because essentially you're not adding another material. You're using what is already what your floor is made out of already, except you're polishing it. I think there is a little bit of an additive to make it a little bit shinier. There's also linoleum, and this is a product that I think a lot of us are familiar with. So that would be a linoleum or marmoleum from Forbo. And I think in the past, the reason why a lot of us weren't using it is that it didn't have that wood look to it. My understanding is that they're working on that. Many different companies are working on that, but linoleum or marmoleum, it's a bio-based product. I believe it's made out of linseed oil and wood pulp and some other things that I can't remember right now. So that's what makes it that much better. There's also rubber flooring that you can look at. I would stay away from synthetic rubbers because, again, they have toxins in them and they use a lot of energy to produce them. And it's essentially a fossil fuel based material. I'm sort of sticking to the flooring. There's also new bio-based flooring, which again, I said earlier, is there's some new ones coming out at NeoCon this year. So hopefully that answers that question. But if there are any other questions, you can always reach out to us at HOK and let us know, and we'd be very happy to answer questions.
Fantastic. Thanks for answering that. The next question we have is, can the portal at Mindful Materials help with materials database management aspect? So I know a lot of people are becoming more and more familiar with Mindful Materials. So are you integrating that into your process at all? Have you considered it? Yes,
actually, we have a designer in our Houston office who is who's just volunteered to join the board for Mindful Materials, so that we can share our understanding of materials and also leverage some of the knowledge that they have. And ensure that the criteria that we are looking for is also on their websites. But yes, we do use Mindful Materials as a resource because you can filter by the categories. So you could filter by like Living Product Challenge materials or Declare and all sorts of other different materials. One of the things I noticed the last time I was on that website was that they did have a section for vinyl products, which I don't, as we said at HOK, we don't specify vinyl, but it is included on Mindful Materials website. Hopefully in the future, maybe it's removed, but yeah, again, I hope I'm answering the questions.
Yeah, that was very helpful. I don't know if anybody else has anything more to add, but feel free to jump in as you see fit in this Q&A period.
Yeah, I think I would just add too that we also love to use a material bank as another resource. This allows us to streamline the material order when we're requesting samples so that we're reducing our carbon footprint in actually sampling products. And it also allows us to filter by some of those same criteria, such as material certifications, FSC certification, that sort of thing.
Yeah. The next question is, hi, where does your Conceptboard live? Is there an HOK office intranet where it is easily accessible for project teams? I guess, how do you manage your process?
Well, it's actually new. I think we just started it a few weeks ago, but yeah, it is internal. So we actually just finished some training for our studios so that they know where to go to get it. And because it's new and because the field of sustainable materials is evolving, and I see it evolving for many decades, it's sort of a living document. So we have it within our internal website. So designers can just go there and find materials. But before a material is posted, it really needs to be vetted by one of our liaisons just to make sure that it is sort of capturing all of those criteria that we're looking for.
The next question is, are there companies that take old materials and store and sell them, not just furniture, but wood and steel or anything that you're familiar with that you've connected to?
I am not connected to anything right now. I am trying to. I've been reaching out to an organization whose title is escaping me right now, but it's essentially Ontario Circularity, something along those lines. That is, similar in that concept of gathering these materials and making them available. So that's definitely something that's on our radar. An organization that I also try to follow is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is from the United Kingdom. But they're all about circularity, and it goes well beyond buildings. They even talk about circularity of food, which is very confusing to me, but yeah, it's a really interesting one as well that I'm hoping to have them help us determine how do we create an organization here and all over the world where we can find resources easily and so that we can make use out of them.
I hope as you uncover some of these answers and overcome these challenges, you come back and share with us for sure. So when taking on a new project, can you help clients inventory what they have towards reusing as much as possible in lieu of buying new? And has this happened in actual practice yet?
Yes, so yes, that's definitely one of those things that we want to do at the beginning of the project. We just had a project, I'll keep the client name confidential, but it was very much a circular project in that we reused what they had on site to the best of our ability. So we cataloged what they had, tailored our design to what we saw so that we could make the most of what they had.
And that really ties into the beginning of the project when we are in pre-design, determining what we want to do with the project and understanding that that time needs to be allocated so that we can just do it correctly and ensure that we're not compromising the reuse potential.
Yeah. Susan, if you're listening and you're still there, I know you've got a quick story time for us.
Quick story time. Well, no, it's getting late, but anyway, yeah, the story time. I love the story because this is an initiative that started at HOK Interiors and with some support from the sustainability team. I like the way that Kelly started and showed the sustainability team at HOK. I'm like, well, no, actually tell the story. It's really the interiors who were starting it. So that's something pretty incredible. One of the stories that they tell is when they were starting this, they brought it to some of the manufacturers And manufacturers ended up actually changing their website because they said, whoa, are you really looking for this information? And so we're actually pushing the suppliers, the manufacturers, to do things differently. So if we don't ask for the change, they're not going to make that change. But that was it. Yeah. Thanks, Scott. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. And actually that was part of the message that we need to bring more out is sometimes we're looking for information. And so we go on supplier websites and we look for it, and when we don't find it, we just shrug our shoulders. In the meantime, that's not encouraging them or giving them a poke to start coming up with that information. So we end up getting into this vicious circle. And the way to break that is if you don't find what you're looking for, send a quick message to whoever your contact is from there, or Google who their sustainability assigned person is. Oftentimes suppliers have a dedicated person, and start sending messages because it's an investment for them to come up with this transparency documentation for materials. And unless they are aware of how many people are asking, they may perhaps not make that investment. So this can help push them a little bit further.
Yeah. Actually, on that note too, oh, sorry, go ahead, Taylor.
Well, maybe it's the same thing that you were about to say, Kelly. Just to build on what Zane is saying, you know, every time we're asking those questions to suppliers, whether or not they're responding right away, they are listening. And the impact that we have with the spending dollars and the spending power that we have as designers is real, and we have influence. So it's important that we acknowledge that and use it to our advantage and to the world's advantage more.
And I mean, the material industry is useless if designers aren't speccing. So they're creating materials that designers want to spec. So, you know, understanding what we're looking for as designers is very critical. So that they can create those materials and respond. They want to know how to be competitive. They want to know what R&D investment they should make and what direction they should be going. And so that feedback is very critical. So I have one more question. Are you finding there are gaps in knowledge as far as EPDs are concerned for interior materials? Any areas where we need to focus more energy on, and products you wish we had access to? Taylor, is that something that maybe you want to touch on? Are there any gaps in knowledge in terms of availability of materials? You've gone out looking for the info, but you just can't find it because they haven't produced it yet.
I would say for the most part, that's there's a gap in fabrics and furniture right now. Camira is a European manufacturer, but definitely available here as well, I think, through Design Text. They just released their EPDs this spring, which is really exciting because I think that they are the first, but there's definitely a gap in furniture in general. And the reason for that, I've been told, is that like furniture is created using many components from all over the world. So creating a cohesive EPD for all of those components is very challenging. And EPDs are not inexpensive to develop. Mm-hmm. So I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that furniture manufacturers have probably started down that road of producing the EPDs for their furniture, but because it's so complex with all of those pieces, it is time consuming and challenging. But right now we find it easier to find an EPD and information for like individual materials like flooring or ceilings and whatnot. Even paint actually is one of those ones that it is a bit challenging to find the information. I was actually looking through a very prominent paint manufacturer's EPD and found that they were missing the life cycle assessment altogether. So I reached out to them and they said, sure, we'll get that. And I have never heard back. So it's challenging.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And I can say that that is a common challenge and a common observation across different organizations who have reached out to get information, and unfortunately just could not find it. So, Taylor?
I think too, there is, sort of similar to what Kelly was saying, sometimes we get the EDP, but we have to really comb through it to ensure that it actually applies to the specific product. We have found, that we will get an EDP from a manufacturer that applies to one very specific line and does not actually apply to the product that we have requested the EDP for, sorry, EPD, I'm saying the acronym incorrectly. But that it doesn't actually apply to that product, or that it might be expired. So really verifying the accuracy and the information itself is a learning curve.
Absolutely. So it's good to do a time check. Thank you so much to all the presenters. Really appreciated your sharing your knowledge. And as you progress through this initiative, we'd be interested to have you back and hear more about some of your findings and observations and what you can teach the rest of us in terms of lessons learned. I want to just remind everybody on the call of our next event, Low Carbon Now, which happens on Wednesday, May 24th. It is a hybrid event. It's going to take place at an actual physical place, so that's kind of exciting, at 200 Wellington Street on May 24th from 6 to 8, but you can also sign up to view online. So thank you so much to everyone. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out directly to any of the speakers. I've already browsed their LinkedIn. They've got LinkedIn profiles, so that I know for sure. So you can definitely reach out to them. So thanks, everyone. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.